Hey, Tantra kinky people. Today, we are going to discuss the foundational myth of humanity, which I absolutely love. It is the ultimate tantric kink, the story of Hades and Persephone. I think it's one of the greatest love stories of all time. And the way I'm going to present this myth is not necessarily about two separate people. It's not about the masculine or the feminine. It's rather a powerful being who chooses to experience both positive, we could say Persephone, or negative, could be Hades, the dark Hades, aspects of the human experience. This is an idea of bringing together both halves of ourselves, the positive and the light side. It's the very essence of shadow work. It's the very essence of humanity because we have forgotten that we are one. Okay, so Hades and Persephone help us to get into that. Okay, so this is kinky. There's trigger warning on everything. This is a Greek myth. Okay, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. If we think that we are fucked up, let's talk about Zeus and Demeter and Persephone and Hades. That is really weird. Okay, so we are creating some new myths, but in order to do that, it's kind of fun and kinky and cool and tantric to get into some of these other myths that help us examine ourselves. Okay, and the tantric way is if it triggers you, you go straight into it. Of course, you want to make sure you're safe, but you got to look at your stuff, right? And that's really what Hades and Persephone teach us. Okay, so I'm going to get right into the story without further ado. Okay, so Persephone, she is this gorgeous goddess. She's really a girl. She is the daughter of Zeus, the god of the sky, the all-powerful god of the sky, and Demeter, the goddess of agriculture. So Demeter and Artemis and Hestia and all the goddesses really protected Persephone as their young virginal goddess because they were surrounded by, gods that were hot for Persephone. And they'd been watching a lot of trauma porn and they really weren't safe to be around. So they really protected her. In fact, Demeter might have been seen as being overprotective of her daughter, which was an appropriate thing to do in a world where girls, okay, this is where the myth came from, Greek mythology, the Greeks, at a time where women were considered to be property, which still is happening today. Fathers would sell their daughters to often older men to be sex slaves for the rest of their life. So this story came out of the extreme pain and suffering and anger, anger of the Greek mothers. So Demeter is actually reflecting that level of anguish and deep sorrow. Okay, so as the story starts out, Persephone is strolling through the beautiful gardens, surveying her beautiful, beautiful flowers. She's holding that in her hand. She's singing. And Hades had to come up to the surface because he heard some shaking. Mount Etna was erupting, okay? And Cupid saw Hades and shot him with one of his golden arrows. And Hades saw this beautiful, beautiful girl and started getting very excited and passionate with her. And it incited passion within himself, within all of the gods and all of humanity, this deep, great passion and lust for this girl. He couldn't control himself. So he tried to flirt with her and get her attention, but Persephone really wasn't into him. She wasn't really into him. So he just remembered some of his sex education from some of the porn he had been watching down in the underworld. And he's like, you know what? I'm the freaking god of the underworld. I can take whatever I want. Okay, so he calls upon his chariot and his great horses, and he rides along and snatches up Persephone, throws her in his chariot, and Gaia herself opens up and allows Hades to go into the underworld, down, 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 down into the underworld. He takes Persephone. Okay, now Persephone is pissed off. She's ranting and raving. She's out of control. She's life herself. She's like really, really irritated with Hades, who's also her uncle. Yeah, that's part of the weirdness, but let's not focus on that. Okay, so Hades, some stories, they would say that Hades raped her. I'm not going to do that in this story because that would ruin the whole thing where I'm going. Okay, but that's part of the program. So if we look at that as humanity raping the sacred feminine, yes, we could look at it that way. And we could look at Hades as saying, hey, Persephone, you're more than this. There's more than just the light. You got to look at your shadow side too. Come with me. I'm going to show you other parts of yourself. So he's actually helping her. So, Persephone is really upset. So Hades actually provides a safe space for her. He basically gives her a castle and people to hang out with, other protective feminine energies to hang out with. I think Lilith and all of her priestesses were there hanging with Persephone, and they proceeded to create beauty, love, sisterhood, even in the underworld. And Persephone started to look at herself. She realized that her mom was crazy controlling and that she had some limiting beliefs about herself and really started to become her own person. And she started flourishing, and she started to realize her own power, her own ability to create. Okay. And Hades, he really loved her. And, Persephone shared with him that the way he treated her was not okay, not to just like abduct her and take her down to the underworld. So Hades, simultaneously, he started going to some men's group, doing some work on himself. He started being more discerning about the media that he was consuming. And he really started treating Persephone with regard and respect and kindness because he really loved her. He really wanted her to be his wife. And, Persephone started warming up to him because she actually did kind of like this guy, because he was kind of dark and sexy and, kinky. And he really wanted her, and that was sexy. So anyway, Demeter, meanwhile, is also very upset, and she's the goddess of agriculture, and she basically dried everything up. The rivers are drying up, the soil is not healthy, and she's mad at Zeus because Zeus basically sold Persephone to Hades. She goes to talk to Zeus, and she's like, hey, like I want our daughter back, and everything is going to be dried up and not fertile until I get her back. And Zeus is like, well, hey, I don't know if I can do anything to help you, stonewall. That's what sometimes the masculine does. And it doesn't really, kind of blows her off. But he's like, hey, well, I'll tell you what, take Hermes down to the underworld and we'll see if you can get her. Because he was upset because, things were drying up on Earth and it's causing all kinds of chaos with humanity. So he's like, okay, just take Hermes and see what you can do. If she's eaten any fruit from the underworld, then it's too late. Okay. So this is basically where we are, I think, in humanity. The consciousness supports the sacred feminine. The consciousness, at least in my country, in the US, we think that women are equal to men, or the feminine is equal to the masculine. However, this power structure, the Zeusian power structure, is still holding on. Okay. So this is kind of where we are. Bam, where we are. So Demeter, she and Hermes going down there. He's a really good, guide, takes her down into the underworld. And, Demeter confronts Hades and says, hey, this is not working. I'm not going to grow anything until I have my daughter back. And so Hades, just at that time, was offering Persephone some seed, his seed, if you will, of pomegranates. She's just been taken those into her mouth. And of course, just as Demeter gets there. And this basically made her the queen of the underworld. And she, in a sense, married Hades. She decided she actually loved him. He proved himself to her. And she married Hades. And she told her mom, she's like, hey, this man is actually pretty good. This deity, he's not a man, he's a deity. He could be a man. I don't know, existential kink. He's actually been pretty good to me, Ma. So he loves me. He has deep regard for me and respect for me. And I'm queen here. I'm like kind of badass down here in the underworld. And I want to be with my husband. So we're going to change the story to Demeter and Persephone. They negotiate a deal. And that deal was that Persephone would come back up to the surface and do her duties along with Demeter part of the year in the spring and the summer. And then she would go back down into the underworld to be with her husband in the fall and the winter. And this is thought to be how the seasons were born or were created. Okay. So they all agree that that's going to work. Persephone is able to be the full queen and the full goddess of spring that she is, that is her birthright. Okay. She rises to the surface. She frees the sacred feminine. She frees the sacred masculine. And her and Demeter proceed to create fertility, beauty, plants, flowers, the trees, the forest. Gaia herself awakens, of course, with them. They're all aspects of Gaia. We're all aspects of Gaia, and transforms the very essence of creation on planet Earth. They say she rises up to her true self, okay, who is a goddess. So we are all sacred. We are all connected. We are all one. Hades and Persephone are one. And that entire Tantrik kink drama was really divinity wanting to experience itself. We're one great being wanting to experience ourselves on deeper levels. And the drama, the chaos, the trauma, and all of that pain, if you will, we can release it when we come back together. When Persephone goes back down to be with her beloved Hades, they have created one of the greatest love stories of all time. And they realize that they are one. They are the Lord and the Queen of the underworld. And they were able to transcend all of that drama to realize that they were actually one being. They were the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine, which is now rising despite appearances. We are love. We are loved. And Hades and Persephone, the story is a perfect representation. You can take a look at your own life on an individual basis or us on a societal level, and it is the ultimate myth for self-observation and witness consciousness, which is a foundational principle for existential kinky tantra. I hope you join me again for our next episode of Tantric Kink. Tits up, y'all.